what all effects will be there is not very clear. Like when you see
new art, there will be a lot of art. Anukratis will go. Attention is paid to that. See, right now, Anukrati is being set by the market. Only few things can go in there. So this would be in celebration of life. Outside the market even, Anukratis can go. Sheer engagement. That is expected that you go up. It is sustained by that, anyway in the past. By this togetherness of three vectors, togetherness of Shastra, with Prayo. So Shastra Prayo, they have to go together. So only the return to originary movement is possible. The contemporary scene of art. And another important thing is that because of rise of West and flood of visual information, a lot of visual information in terms of letters, in terms of pictures, in terms has come in today. So the era itself changes its character. So the modern era, a lot of visual element has come. A new form like film has come, cinema. So all this has to be domesticated. One has to domesticate film, one has to domesticate the situation of vision. Currently the visual memory is very high and sonic memory is very poor. People don't remember who said what. People do remember, this advertisement, that thing, that corner, this corner. A lot of visual memories there among children and very little sonic memories are. So this is a new situation, one has to address these situations also. In that Shastra Prayog originally situations. So I had begun this series with in the backdrop of certain understanding of the West. The backdrop of what has happened as a surge of knowledge, understanding and sort of technology and other things which has happened in modern times. The new sort of science, technology and quality has come out. And with this background, I began and the image of knowledge which has come today and the image of knowledge which is traditionally there are very different. And it's very illustrated within the field of art. Knowledges are one of the most potent idea of modern knowledge is the idea of form. In modern knowledge, which is last 4 centuries of knowledge, the form has played a very important role. And form is one idea which is not sufficiently reflected out in West. There is a formal logic, there is mathematics, etc. That idea's form has been taken up by or abdicated by science. Science has abdicated or the idea of form in Western tradition. The idea goes back to Plato, Aristotle and the medieval time. But there is a reinvention of the idea of form in the modern times. But this idea of form in the modern times has a problem. The problem is what I said last time. In summary, modern form has a closure in it. And whereas we can think of disclosure forms. And in the Indian tradition, we have the ideas of disclosure forms and form as impetus, as force, as comitas, which is very strong in the Indian tradition. So we are looking at form, which is logically closed form, or form as a distillation of language into a rigorous grammar. That is an modern idea of form. And whereas form as a force, as impetus, is very Indian. So I begin with this, that there are in Gita three concepts being used. One is the perishable stuff, the Shar Purush, Akshar Purush and Uttam Purush. Now, Akshar Purush is not clear what it is. What is Akshar? It is not very clear. There are tens of ways of looking at this very originally cosmological and mythological enigma of how is Akshar different from Brahman, Uttam. And this, I think, is a problem of Indian modernity. Last 300 years of India modernizing, 250 years or so of India modernizing, there is appropriation of Indian past in a way that Akshar is forgotten. There is Brahman and there is Shara, the perishable and imperishable. But what is Akshara? That is forgotten in modern times. There's modern rendering of Advaita like that. But traditional Advaita had thought a lot about Akshara. And we have several scenarios by which imagination of Akshar is there in the tradition. And which can be found in the commentaries on this particular shloka of Gita, 15th chapter, 16, 17, several commentaries. They each speak of what is Akshar. So Akshar is seen as Atman. Akshar is seen as in variety of ways. Each of them actually is, there are certain properties that Akshar is Kutastha. It doesn't accentuate or diminish. It is never born, never dies. But it can be present or not present in different situations. So, though Brahman is pervasive, Akshar is not. Akshar is local. Very local. It's a punctuational in, I have seen this thing, it's punctuational in character. And it's there in the etymologically also in a term like prapanch. Punch, pull, point, disappoint, these are all images of a punctuational form. When one says a point, what is a point in this talk? These points are non-geometrical forms where you hover around a point, and this point is a form, the akshara. And akshar means sarg, it means impetus of evolution, etc. So, in the European tradition, it's Leibniz which tried to make this idea of a point as a form, as an ontological form, not as a logical form, as reality being configured or arranged in these forms, as if these forms are real. And these forms, akshar, do not have any existence. Their existence is surrogate on the entities they punctuate. But they are knowable and they are expressible. These properties this form has. And there are two, I said there are two fundamental forms. And one is the form of transference. In the Indian tradition, bhavati is supposed to be samanya kriya, not asti, not vidyati, not karoti. It's bhavati, which is samanya kriya, which means wherever there is any expressibility of change happens, wherever there is expression of change, there is co-occurrence of a verb happening. happening will occur. Bhavati will be co-occurrent wherever there is an expression of change. And so we can say, we can make a verbal noun bhav. So bhavs are like adhar, adher bhav, karakaran bhav, etc. Vachya vachik bhav, vyangya vyangi bhav, angangi bhav. There are many bhavs. So these bhavs are basic aksharas. All these bhavs are the basic aksharas. Indian theoretical traditions employed hundreds of bhavs for analysis. They are basic punctuations, basic forms. Every theory, from linguistics to mathematics to art theory to political theory to even theory of behavior, etc. Everything has these units or these forms called bhav. Because that is bhav is the transference between two states with a punctuation and the transference in some context of the word. So there is another logical device. This was one logical device, very popular in Indian tradition, and nothing at all, not even a word of it, one can find in the West. Except in Greek times, you find these words. In Aristotle, you find some of these bhavs. And between attribute and object, there is a bhav. Sometimes you find these things in the West, but one doesn't find these logical units. Two entities brought into contiguity and distinct, non-identical, non-symmetric entities in a context. This is the idea of bhav. It's a logical form. There is another thing that wherever any expression is happening, wherever in that site, there may be collocation with happening, what is happening there, which is form. There can also be existentials there. Wherever things are happening, the expression is being, there it could be existentials. The happening of existentials is taught by a form called bhav pratyay. Bhav pratyay is given a extension thing like mic. The bhav pratyay returns micness, the ghost of mic, which every mic in the world will have. This is upadhi. That is a phantom. So you have one fundamental form which is bhav pratyay, which gives a link between any extension, any presence and its ghost, its phantom. And another is bhavati, a transference. Using these two analytic devices, there is a tradition of theorizing in India. It's in grammar one can see in other disciplines also. For Vaisheshik Padarth, we have tried to work with these two forms to recreate. The previous summer school was on that. How to construct, how to generate, how to understand various categories of reality just by looking at these forms. And by looking at these forms, we are able to construct Vaisheshik categories. Good portion of Vaisheshik categories we are able to construct. So that is a formal ontology portion. The move example could be that there is a form Vaisheshik takes, adhar adhe. Everything is located somewhere or other. And in locus, something else is located. In that locality, something else is located. It can be infinite of things located. Imagine that there is a world of entities and all of them are located on each other. In that case, we can come to invariance certain locations which are not located anywhere. It's a very formal invariance. some locations which are not located anywhere. And we know space, time, self, matter, etc. are those locations which are not located anywhere. In them things are located, but they themselves are not located anywhere. So very formally, we can come to a reality called Antadrav or other guna, etc. All these formations come. In that description of formal ontology that we constructed, there was a gap. And that gap was that we could handle sort of pratyaksha, which is bahindriya janya pratyaksha. These 5 sense organs, out of which whatever nirvikal pratyaksha come from them, how to make savikal, that understanding existed. But what did not exist that time, and we thought attention need to be paid, is antendriya pratyaksha. Antendriya pratyaksha is what we call imagination in English. That what we see happening in our own mind, to be able to see what is happening in our own mind, that is called being reflective on one's own imagination. So, in this Summer Institute, the idea was to look at imagination. It starts with some kind of Ichha Shakti, and there's a mulling which takes place. In the end, it leads to certain activity of motor organs, and which lead to work of art. So, there is this cycle of sort of vikalp and kalpana and sankalp and then kalp. That cycle is of art. So, paying attention to antendriya pratyaksha and also antendriya anuman, various other things, all the pramanic abilities which are there. And in our imagination, what happens is that unlike external sense organ imagination, where jatis etc. are also perceived, we know that there is a bottle. It has water in it. Likely to have water, could be something else also, or whatever. So, whereas in our imagination, upadhis are there. Upadhis are ascripted entities, entities which are covered, entities which, we may look outside and somehow may think that somewhere between a color of a wood and the whiteness of outside light, in between that light should cover this base. This is like upadhi, giving a upadhi to something. And then I begin making a base color on canvas like that, and then start doing something else. So their imagination is upadhis which you give. And in the previous summer school, we showed that there are 2 kinds of upadhis. One is akhand upadhis, one is sakhand upadhis. Akhand upadhis are the ones which by their logic zero on to defining reality. And sakhand upadhis are ones which are which are compositional upadhis. Art largely deals with the compositional upadhis or imagination. So then I went on to give a story of from Chitra Lakshan. I think it's a very important story and very important, very illustrative of what is the nature of imaginary reality. That imaginary reality and how does it come to be, what role it plays, what is the relation of imaginary reality with truth. These are the issues we begin with. And in this story, there are two phenomena which come up. One is the phenomena of denuding. When we get a cognition, we commit that cognition to memory. Much of the details of cognitions are left out. Purely denuding happens when there is a bottle, and when we put it to our memory, when we recall bottle, the bottle doesn't arrive. What arrives is certain denuded bottle. So there is this process of denudification, of all the fresh is left out, and some things are kept in memory. This is equivalent to death. In death, your spirit goes there, body is left here. So the spirit of cognition and the spirit of actions go into memory, and that is one process of sort of disembodiment which takes place. There is another process of re-embodiment. So when the son had died, unnatural death, because you lived in a polity in which there is, every death is timely death. There is no untimely death there. Somebody died. So the spirit has gone to Parlok. There is no way the spirit could be returned to the same body. So Brahman says you can return it into a different body. You can keep a body of canvas, pigments, paints, etc. and bring in the spirit, lock the spirit in that body, and one can have a rebirth like that. And art is like that. Art is a removal of spirit from body, purification of spirit, mulling over it in your imagination, and then re-embodying that spirit through a motor activity into a work of art. So, how is it? The conquest over denuded realm is the prerequisite to do art, prerequisite to do great imagination. That one must be entirely familiar with one's own memory. The memory is not just of episodic memory. The memory is sequential memory as well as semantic memory. Whole culture, entire culture, all itihas, all that is semantic memory, which is there. And skills, etc. are sequential memories. And our own episodic memories we have in our own lifetime. They are there. So this is the realm of denuded realm. In this denuded realm of our smriti, which is called, and this is memory word is called some smaller word for smriti. Because smriti is of actions also, not merely of cognitions. And all the smriti is there. So when we commit something to memory, actions can be committed either as sequential, only sequential formations, which are called skills. So, skill of gripping, infant tries, a man has. It's repeated grippings in many ways, and the memory of that is that each of the grip act had too much of content, but it was denuded onto a simple skill, and so personalized skill. So there are skills are memories, are smrtis, and then we have a whole lot of so many characters in the world, so many people we know of, so many. This is semantic memory. Lot of their meanings are very valuable to us. They are significant portion of reality that we also believe and keep with us. And then we have our own personal episodic memories. And this happened in my life and that happened in my life. When I was there, this I heard, that I heard. So this is the process of creating lagnas. And the Nagnajit is one who conquers this and is able to mull over lagnas in such a way that the spirit, intended spirit is caught and turned into a work of art. A new body is given. Then after that, I said that there are different art forms because the body in which the imagination has to be soft fired, like the paint and the canvas is a body on which this boy has to be painted, has to be, that imagination has to be put there. That depends on the types of bodies in which embodiment is possible. Anukriti is possible. Which are the types of bodies? These types of bodies will give us types of art forms. And just before that, I said that every witness, every act of a Sakshi Bhava, there is fundamental solitude of Sakshatra. When there is Sakshatra, there are no two Sakshi. There is one Sakshatra is there. And this Sakshatra is solitary. There is nobody else watching your own mind except you yourself. Nobody can peep into your head the way you can peep into your head. Now this enclosure is very hard. Nothing leaks into it, nothing leaks out of it. And so if there is something spectacular happening in Antendriya Pratyaksh, there is a desire to express it, to show it to others. Then one requires a body, somewhat like a human body, which can harbor this fantasia or this sensorium of mind. Our bodies can harbor this sensorium of mind. Which other bodies can harbor sensorium of mind? Which are other bodies? So, canvas and pigments is another body in which I can soft fire fantasia, portion of my fantasia, which others can witness. So, that is why art means discovering new bodies on which my imagination can be communicated to others. One of the most familiar body is phoneme. Phoneme is a material body, is an enclosure on which something can be disclosed. Its sonority can be disclosed, its various features can be disclosed, its semantic features also can be disclosed, its lexical features can be disclosed. Just on the phoneme. Phoneme is a body. It's a body made of breath and air. So, and on this body there is a disclosure which happens. So, if you look at various forms of bodies which are there, we classify the bodies which can have disclosure soft fired onto them. These bodies are of two types. One type being synchronic, in which all parts of the enclosure and disclosure are available at once. There is no temporal parts. There are other so-called performative arts which have temporal parts. Some part is happened now, other is come later, other part will come later, etc. There are two kinds of bodies, enclosures. One are synchronic enclosures, one are diachronic enclosures. And within synchronic enclosures and diachronic enclosures, very interesting play of space-time happens. space, time and body. These three things are played interestingly. And by body, space, time, body I mean the stuff inside. That is the bodies. So in a painting, there is a body of a 2D body of canvas with pigments of color deposited. This 2D body has a horizon, and between spectator and the horizon there is, between 2D and 3D there is an imaginary sort of painting, imaginary space in the painting. When somebody watches a painting, there is an imaginary space there. And this imaginary space is between the horizon, enclosed there. The horizon has been enclosed. And between me and the horizon, that painting exists. It's more than 2D, less than 3D. Because motion in that enclosed space, which is imaginary space, is very different. You can't kick things in that imaginary space. You can kick things in 3D space. That space is different. We also went into certain kind of quantity of the space, but that is later. So, in a painting, there is the imaginary space which is constructed on a piece of metal, special piece of metal, this canvas. When we construct that, there is certain imagination happening. This imagination is giving rise to motor activity, and there are certain skills of hand which are deployed to construct. So let's say that if one makes a stroke on the canvas, this stroke may look like a line of pigments, of colors, but it is not a line. It's actually a hidden plane which is hidden there inside. By putting another stroke, I open that interior planes. I open the space between horizon and me, imaginary space. By putting another stroke, I culture this space. Then another stroke, every painting is just finite strokes which culture this abhav or this space. And the strokes are the grammar. When I put strokes, what all types of strokes are there, what all kind of things I do with them, and that is a grammar of painting. And this grammar of painting is in aid of disclosing that imagination. And once that imagination is, this imagination is actually hardwired on that canvas. Causally, there is no, when the canvas is lying there, no witness is there, there is no painting there. So, but the moment that canvas is seen with paints, these paints they rub into my memory. When they rub onto my memory, slowly the imaginary space gets constructed. So it's actually inverse of the algorithm I gave for conversion, of making things. So pigments are visible things. After some more and more pigments are deposited, the pigments become invisible and the imaginary space becomes visible. If the pigments are still visible in the hand, it's not a good painting. Pigments should become invisible. So when say he is stroking, the moment plucking is done, this plucking should become invisible when Sai Bhava is happening. What are all the prayaj which is there for playing, even this veeras should become invisible in creating that imaginary space. And in fact for flute it is said, once you begin playing flute, after some time it becomes only air. There is no flute, only air is there. and control is there on sound. So there is this algorithm from visible to invisible. What is visible in enclosure? When the enclosure becomes invisible, then you get a work of art. And the same thing from visible, you rub onto memory. The visible things rub onto memory. Slowly the visibles become invisible. When I say memory, I mean smriti, which means even even like when music is going on, that there is sort of knowledge or understanding that this swara has happened and that swara is happening. These understandings are also happening in imagination. But the actual cause of that imagination was stroke. Stroke and the pressures which are given, these are the real material things which are happening. And these material things are creating that imagination. And so we can look at various art forms and understand that they all have different kind of enclosures. For instance, sculpture, the way painting enclosure is there, you cannot go around painting enclosure. There has to be a depth or resolution of the sense of direction. You can't have radial symmetry in painting. You can't go around painting. If you go around, there is next painting and the next painting. The same painting is a kind of enclosure is such that you cannot go around it. You can go around sculpture. So enclosure of sculpture is such. The enclosure of sculpture is a radiant enclosure. You only sculpt the ambience. You never sculpt the clay. When the clay is there, when somebody is sculpting the clay, you sculpt the ambience. Because what is going to radiate out of that surface of sculpture is the imagination. And out of that radiation, you will impute something inside. There is a statue of Gandhi. The interiors of that statue are relevant. You see the surface of that statue and whatever it radiates in that ambience. And through that radiation, you impute a character of Gandhi in that sculpture. Describe that. Because there are enough lakshanas, classically 32 or 36 lakshanas can complete a sculpture from all sides. And so it's a radiant, it's exposition space, whereas painting space is involuted space. Involution you can't circumnavigate. Exposition you can circumnavigate. Architecture is a breathing thing between involution and exposition. Architecture is fundamentally a door. And it is a space in which your time, sculptures and painting, consume entirely the time of the spectator. But architecture doesn't consume the time of spectator. In fact, architecture is where you can surrender your time. A lived space is that space where your own personal time can be surrendered with a sense of security and well-being. That's a lived space. A lived space architecture is always about others' times, that you are living in the company of others. Every wall speaks of others, people who made it, situation under which that house is made, who all contributed, where all cement came from, all kind of stories are there. It is because architecture is others' time. And one of the great fallacy is that I will design my own home. It's a great fallacy. In fact, best of masons never stay in the place where they, or the sthapatis never stay in a place which they have constructed. Because that's a great error of In fact, there is this little story. There was a person I knew called Ganpati Sthapati from Mahabalipuram, and we was dropping him to airport from IIT Delhi in Delhi. So on the way, on the right side, if some people who are in Delhi would have seen something called Milai Mandir. Anybody seen Milai Mandir? Huh? Oh yeah. So Delhi people have seen Milai Mandir. It's a small hill on top of which there is a mandir. So we were just passing by little there. He just made a remark. I made this. So I jumped. I said, let us go from the next U-turn, get back, and now I have the privilege of seeing this Milai Mandir with a person who has made it. So he said categorical no, he will not go there. No, I mean, taking me there is way off. He cannot go there. He will not go there. So they said, why? He said, एक बार मूर्ति स्थापना हो गई. Then, the work is over. My work is over. And then I have no relation with it. जब तक उसकी स्थापना नहीं, तब तक I have the entire control of the thing. Made everything. But the moment it is sort of become functional, I will not go. I will have no attachment with that place. I never sort of, it's just said it that I made it. But so people who make these sort of where work of art is finished, that creator disengages completely because the enclosure can sustain by itself and can find witnesses. Plural witnesses can be found. So similarly, painting, sculpting, architecture, when put in time, they become music, dance and drama. And then all of them have a very interesting relation in terms of their grammar, relation in terms of their body, which is enclosures, and also in terms of grammar, and then the content which is disclosed inside. So if the music has strokes of temporal strokes, like temporal strokes of plucking. In yesterday's thing, plucking is done with the temporal strokes, and pressures which are put on the string are temporal strokes. And in this temporal stroke, certain stasis is being created in the interior of the imagination. In the painting, the strokes are frozen strokes. Just freeze them. Complete stroke means something, not half stroke. Whereas music, even half stroke means something. Then interior of the strokes are, though it's non-temporal, painting strokes are spatial strokes, artificial space. But interiors of painting are all fluid, are all temporal. Inside painting, everything is moving. The clouds are moving, everything is moving inside painting. And so the interior exteriors are different. Space-time and the bodies, the stuff, the body, sukshma bodies which are there. So a painting may be called a sukshma body. And it's an installation in sukshma sharira. A music is an installation in sukshma sharira. And that is our imaginary space. So there are various art forms on which to different degree of one can, lots of insights can be worked out based on these enclosure disclosures and their specificities. What more can be worked out is the blending of these enclosures. So painting can be embossed, little bit like sculptures. One can emboss it, and that creates something different, which has a bit of sculpting in it, and bit of so before we can go to some details of so all art forms are like this. There is some meaning, stuff of meaning, there is some time, there is some space, and there is an enclosure on which you disclose all this imagination. So one can study their bending and their each of them fairly extensively. When we go to each of them, there are traditions of theorizing. In music, there is a tradition of theorizing. In painting, there is a tradition of theorizing. Shadang, etc., some things are there. And one has to look into these traditions of theorizing and look as if what kind of culturing of the imaginary space in music, imaginary space is done. One can look at that. And which is like in dance, what kind of imaginary space is there? One can look at that. Now to go a little step higher on this, because one has to look at three different types of reality, which human being in a relationship tradition, human being itself is a compound of every category in reality. Whatever categories are there, some substances are there. All of them are put together to make a human being. Not a speck of substance is left out. It's put in certain arrangement to make a human being. There are three kinds of realities there, which is general. One is a reality which is material reality, where continuous space-time is there and supposedly there, and there existential reality, where things tend to be, where things tend to be, that reality, where things tend to prevail, tend to endure. That is existential reality. Which are categorical reality, is that. Then there is a reality in which things don't tend to be. They sort of ephemeral, which is the reality of mind, anubhav. Anubhav is momentary. It's there, then next moment something else is there, next moment something else is there. There things don't tend to be. In fact, St. Augustine defined this being of time tends not to be. And but that is mystique, metaphysics. But the reality of anubhav, mental reality, antendriya pratyaksh reality, which is there. If I may also mention, it is only in antendriya pratyaksh that even bahindriya jnana and its anurasya happens. Even that is happening inside pratyaksh. So there is this reality of experience. The reality of experience, the reality of existence. Even experience itself has certain existential features, these are details. But there is a reality of experience. And then there is a reality of symbols. There are three realities. The symbolic reality, the experiential reality, and the existential reality. They are not mutually exclusive. They are intertwined into a graph, into a structure, which you call, but they have relative independence. So if we see that these three sort of realms of essentials, realms of experientials, and realm of symbolic, they have certain relation among them. and I went into that for a while to understand what is the way in which imaginary topos can be reconfigured, can be molded, can be twirled, twisted, sheared, etc., torn, or whatever. Imaginary topos, the features, properties of these topos. To look at that. For that, we have to go to the part of topos. So parts of extension topos, extension space, parts of exponential space, and parts of symbolic space. Symbolic space we know is discrete, but we can say exponential space is discrete, and also extension space is discrete, but they look so dense to be continuous. Exponential space is also dense enough, not dense enough, contiguous enough to be continuous. Like a film, exponential space, everything is close, everything are in flow in exponential space. Now these three spaces have a different measures, amounts of parts in them. So amounts of part in extension space are very large compared to exponential space, and for symbolic space is the one which computer science deals with, and so it is said that it is the symbols are those numbers which have some notation, which have some name. Numbers having name are called symbols. If that is so, then computer is technology of symbol crunching. It only crunches those symbols which have names, which is symbols which have identification, IDs with them. Those which can be fetched, it deals with that kind of thing. But experience can't be captured in notations. There is more cardinality than this notational space. And extension, of course, seems to have definition more cardinality than explanation space. It's more dense. But in an expression topos, symbols come to be used in a special way. Why? In Visheshic tradition, in the symbolic space, symbol occur as chinna chinni bhav. There is a denotation space. That expression space has a denotative structure. Denotative structure is that it doesn't have a notative structure, which like the recursive orders of this have, operational numbers. They are measures which have denotative structures. That there is, in that denotative structure of symbols, there is always symbol and symbolized in this. And this and this is a cardinal structure, not very ordinary. All the categories are cardinal structures. They occur in experience. All the categories occur. All the differentials occur in experience. All the punctuations occur in experience. And these are that it will have a punctuational structure experience. Whereas in the notative thing, there has to be a closure structures, notative symbols. So once we divide these three symbolic realms, now we can understand various disciplines of art a little better. Because we can even put parts of, not just talk about bodies as clouds or aggregate kind of things, but also look at parts of bodies. Then I introduced something called Sukshma Sharir. Sukshma Sharir is, and also to actually understand drama and dance, that one has to bring in. A Sukshma Sharir is a body which is access through Antendriya Pratyaksh. Sthul Sharir is a body which is accessed through Bahindriya Pratyaksh. We can see others' bodies. We can see our own body also. And but Sukshma Sharir is what which has only solitary witness. Only I can see mine body. Nobody else. So a pain, for example, is only in Sukshma Sharir. It's not there in Sthul Sharir ever. Because neither you can touch the pain, nor you can see, nor you can smell the pain. You can touch and smell something and guess there is a pain. You can guess, but you can't have a sense of pain by external sense organs. You have to have internal sense organ to have a sense of pain. So what really is Sukshma Sharir? Sukshma Sharir is recursive motion of Manas. Manas is a very special entity which moves in the body, like entities which move in space, but it only has one state at a time. Manas. That's why sequestration. No body in space, which is spread in space, can have just one quality. But Manas is a entity which has just one quality at a time, cause quality. Because it has just one state, nothing in space, like the color of this, is so variegated. Its hardness is there, so many qualities are there, which are spread out. Hardness at the bottom is better than hardness at the in a sort of horizontal axis. Vertical axis hardness is more than in the horizontal axis. So it's a variegated thing. And the qualities of everything are variegated. Sukshma Sharir is made out of largely two types of sensors, and it's made out of 5 kinds of sensors actually, but primarily 2 sensors. One is the sensor of image, which is location, direction. These are properties of image. There is certain sensor of this kind, like there is a pain in the knee, there is a location of that pain. There is an image is there. And then it is made out of a sound. There is a cry of pain. It is made out of sound. Why just sound and color? Like by image, what one means is color. Color is something which is spread in directions, which is all the features of image. So, how a sound and color can create Sukshma Sharir? So, what actually is Sukshma Sharir? When I am trying to grip something, the Manas made all kind of motions to learn gripping. It went through all their sort of throat. There are channels where Manas moves. It went through all those channels repeatedly and cultured that. So this sediments of repeated attempts to grip things and attempts when the grip failed, when you are able to catch ball, the bat, and the analysis of that. This entire thing is covered up in Sukshma Sharir. We call that memory as Sukshma Sharir of this. So, moment I have to do gripping, is all motor controls pass through this Sukshma Sharir, and I do it. So, what also else is this Sukshma Sharir? In this Sukshma Sharir, one can emulate objects also. One can actually emulate something like a fire, even Devis in the joints, one can see colors of the joints, of the muscles, not muscles, certain functions which you do. They have colors, all those functions. They have sounds. They have all these things are there in the Sukshma. So not only entire motor apparatus is Sukshma, but entire some apparatus we just emulate. First is pain. Pain is the apparatus we have just constructed so that there is a control over everything. And some malfunction is there in that control, pain comes up. So that attention is paid to that malfunction. The pain comes up. The variety of pains, and the body is very complex. Sukshma Sharir, a study of Sukshma Sharir is called Ayurveda. Not that Sukshma Sharir is given up, but so in fact it's said the geometry of human body is like a flying bottle. It's warped. It's warped where a 4D can be depicted in 3D, but in a distinct way. A 3D can be depicted in 2D in a distinct way. It is said that Tvachendriya envelops the entire body. For example, even your tongue, even eyelids, everywhere. So it's enclosure. Tvachendriya is enclosing the entire body. But there has to be some kind of door for things to go in. And this door is from where two kind of ahars go. Sthula ahar and Sukshma ahar. There are 5 doors, the total 7 doors here in the head, 7 windows. And so one for, 2 for nose and for eating, for Sthula ahar. And the 5 for Sukshma ahar. There is intake of substances. And there are depositions inside. Some of them are bow and band in deposition. Whole lot of already deposited substance can be chopped off, rid off also. And there is this process which is going on, complete process. And in this process, when we have Sukshma Sharir done, I tried to give an impression of what is motion. What actually is motion and impetus, so that we get more structure to impetus in the art, in the imaginary space. So conceptually, motion, once you have a place like, I don't have just my place, my Sukshma Sharir. I also have Sukshma Sharir of Sri Ram, Sukshma Sharir of Amitabh Bachchan, Sukshma Sharir of anybody, Obama. I have access to all that. What is the Sukshma Sharir of Obama? It's all the skand of all the deeds he has done. I know all of them. Even Amitabh Bachchan, all deeds he does. And the situation he is caught in. I know all of it. How do I know? Because even I have access to that. There are so many bodies dangling in Parlok, including our own body, but our own body has motor controls only. The bodies in Swarg, in Naglo, they don't have motor controls. They have to beg to us, beg to men, for them to be effective. All the gods beg before men to be effective. And so there are 2 fundamental ideas. One, these are extremely abstract enclosures. These are also kind of enclosures all concepts are enclosures. The concepts have certain sounds, etc., and they mean something. The concepts, when they pronounce, they have sounds, and what they mean is an enclosure, is a disclosure in them. So one is the concept of locus, another is the concept of movement. Shana and Adhar. So movement is a temporal concept and locus is a spatial concept, location. In movement, time passes, but it is that duration of time pass in which none of the disclosure has any temporal feature. All the disclosure is synchronous, is available to us at once. So a movement of Gyan is that in which all portions of Gyan, all portions of cognition are at once accessible. It's complete thing. This is slightly paradoxical that you have time passing and you have no time passing at the same time. Because we are including a punctuation between enclosure and disclosure. And then locus is also something located somewhere. So locus is a space by itself, provides a space. But locus can be in no space. For instance, locus by itself is in no space. Locus provides a space for locating. But locus is no space. It's a spatial idea of space. It's a site. It's a discrete idea of space. Locus. Like movement is a discrete idea of time. It's a unit of time. Locus is a unit of space. We do all our business with these units of time and space, movement and locus. And for movements, we have very telling movements which we call events. Very, very planned movements. We have to capture those movements in art. And movements can embed movements. A content of one movement can become a content of another movement. A movement can embed also a movement and the content. Because movement and its content. A movement is one where everything can come in. Movement before death is a movement where all life is summarized. This is a backward necessity. Before anybody dies, there is necessarily movement where everything is summarized. So movement is a synchronic summary. Everything is disconnected in a moment. Suppose if we say, let's collect all sensibilities in the world, whenever they happen. There were some bodies people put in their imagination. Every person did that. Some other bodies came in their imagination. Let's do an abstract move, thought experiment. Collect all imaginations done anywhere in the past into that set. Let's see how with that, we call it a sort of a set of, say, God's imagination. It's everybody's imagination. Each person did whatever imagination of childhood to death. We collect all of them. How would it look? It will look totally incompatible, totally contrary to each other. Lot of contradiction inside, lot of incompatibility inside. And one person's imagination go against other person's imagination. So deeds which may have come out of this imagination, they would be conflicting deeds. So this will be a ruckus. I mean, it's not worth having in God's hand, such as that. Because it will be too much of what is to be done here and there and then and now, all these things will have conflicts in variety of people. So if we can find a condition under which there is no such conflict, under which such conflict doesn't exist, that will become a closure condition. It so happens in the punctuation logics that closure conditions are meta conditions. They are not operational conditions. For example, there can be a meta condition. Meta is outside the system condition. That whatever be the upadhis and sensibilities in these, they all are, say, harmonious in principle. But actually, one doesn't know which is the next harmonious step. Given few sensibilities, I don't know what to do next. But I know that if everybody's imagination is taken together, whatever deeds it may lead to, they are all harmonious. But this is a meta condition. Meta condition is that given some sensibility, there is no reason why sensibilities always occur in the company of other sensibilities. Like words always occur in the company of other words. So sensibilities also, or bodies also, they always occur in company of other bodies. So that there are no conflicts. In principle, every conflict among them is resolvable. In principle. Not that given a conflict I will give a resolution. Nobody can probably give a resolution readily. But in principle, it is resolvable. This meta level closure is called pratibha. Pratibha of the artist is being able to create among disparate elements of sensibilities, among perceived situations of mankind, humanity. The way out of that is worked out. A great artist is an embodiment of this meta condition. So, one of the theses is that casual or causal behavior is formally closed, not causally closed. There are no operation in cause effect which will lead to mukti. There's nothing there. It's just a formal closure can happen. And formal closure is for the disclosure forms. The formal closure is meta, which sets up a condition for completeness, consistency. For instance, that is there a kind of imagination which will never find a work of art. There will be no enclosure, some very innately only in human. So in principle, work of art presumes, to do work of art presumes that there is no such imagination. If you assume that there is an imagination which can never be put into work of art, which can never be expressed, then every expression is faulty. Every expression will necessarily become faulty. That's the condition I gave there of the equality of three topos. That's information. So you cannot believe that there is certain imagination which only I can have, nobody else. There is no ground for such belief. And such a belief is anti-art, anti-creation, anti-society, it's a one which creates privilege. Huh? No, I'm saying that if there is a piece of imagination which in principle cannot be expressed, then nothing can be expressed. But there is a social there is a class identity present today, especially from the artistic thinking thought in the West. It has created this global urban space. It has created in which certain kind of class of artists have come up, who are saying that there is some privileged access to reality with them. That exclusiveness and is also being asserted. And you cannot handle experiential space without denotation. Symbols, when they are applied in denotational space, the denotational structure has high cardinality. Because with low cardinality symbol, the high cardinality sort of transordinary are there. So we are dealing with that structural cardinality, not just with. So what happens is, if you do action, this is an important point, like a symbolic space, action space is also finite. And action space is also recursively finite, very ordinary. Number of strokes you do are finite on the painting. Number of moves you make to sculpt are finite. Number of moves you make in dancing are finite, countably, listably finite. I mean, very badly finite. A painting could be something like 231 strokes, or a painting could be around 5,717 strokes. Actually, number of strokes are as listable. Action is like a symbolic space, a very, very finite thing. But doesn't mean that what all molecules are moved in doing one action also will have the same cardinality. But the relation between them keeps that cardinality. So when the faults of moves happen, then there is a break in that relationship, which needs to be repaired, or a new relationship has to be established, etc. So it is not flat. The flatland of symbol crunching is not extendable to the colorful land of experience. But people do modeling these days. That is there. But I keep saying that the mental procedures may not be computable. Why should they be computable? They are procedures. Shastras deal with mental procedures, and our bodies are equipped to handle those mental procedures. Our bodies are able to handle that. We do work of art. So they may not be computable.
I'm not saying experience is privileged. Experience can be shared by people. But what I'm saying is, it cannot
work of art. Only method is to work of art.
I'm saying there could be certain imaginations, certain experiences which cannot be anchored in symbolic space.
No, in not symbolic. Anchoring is on material space.
Okay.
Not symbolic space. Symbolic space is iconic anchoring. That is inside. That is like lexical. That is language anchoring. But here in art we anchor on material. There is no art without material underbelly. All art must have material. Whereas symbolically you can do some other things also in the mind. You can do logic with them, you can do many things. Symbolic anchoring is a different affair than material anchoring.
Then if suppose through some rigorous process I could visualize a new color. There is no way in which I can express it through work of art or anything to another person. The other person also could probably invoke that color through some process. But there is a necessity of shared experience prior for all other things.
There is always a way to express that color. That's what artists do. They express that color. They take paints to express that color, and the witness people, other spectators, they also endorse that color and utilize that color for the depths, exploring depths.
No, I mean literally a new color. Suppose a colorblind person, how much ever information I give, he can't.
We have a very poor idea of colors. Most of the colors are unknown colors. And so color is the most unreflected portion of reality. And but color has been worked on by mankind heavily in terms of say even making so many lexical items related to colors. So language has so many words for colors, and all those colors are not really known. They are known to people who are who are using that color or who enjoy that color. But most of these colors, you don't know. I mean, this Bharat is trying to find out what does these colors mean. For 1.5 years, he is not able to find out. What does Gerwa mean? Which hue is that? What is khaki? What is Veda? So, these sensibilities, I am saying, sensibility is so subtle. Color, taste. For instance, yesterday some mango, we had mango juice. There was certain roughness in that mango, and there was sensibility. That roughness was a slightly bland kind of thing. So it looked like that mango is safeda. Maybe some association of words with the sensibility, the taste of it. It is definitely not where there is a sweet it is not there the sweet is engrossed the entire thing. There was a little kind of slip of roughness in that. That comes, and that looked white. The roughness texture sounded white. So since there is a term called safeda, I thought there is safeda wala. There is a mango variety called safeda. Just that. So these are all worked out, very subtle things. Colors are like that. Textures are, we work, but we don't pay attention to that. Because we have stopped working on language. India has stopped working on language.
What makes the real difference between an ordinary man and a creative artist? It's not that the ordinary man cannot imagine or doesn't have imagination, but an ordinary man cannot express that imagination and give it an embodiment. Therein where the pratibha of an artist.
Pratibha comes. So pratibha is only embodiment of the access to the transcendental closure of causality. That is called pratibha. The access to that. The quest to formulate justice, to engage with injustice, to do away with injustice. This quest, this drive and this impetus, very native to person. Because there is a transcendental closure, formal closure, that all disputes are resolved. Because of that, there exists this embodiment of that form is this quest. So pratibha is that. At the top of pratibha, there would be objective. Watch it also is a reduction of the completeness. Pratibha is gifted. It's a gift. It's a gift of labor. Like Raghunath has done so much hard work that the gift will show later. It will become Shiromani later. Whereas the Pratibha is there. It's also earned, and it's not just God given. A lot of hard work has gone behind a Pratibha. So it's not just Prabhu Kripa. So anyway, once we get this idea of somewhat paradoxical idea of movement and locus, then so we can now think of this is what we do. All the time our conceptions are about where I am, kahan ja rahe ho, kahan nahi ho. All these are the concepts. We populate this abstract idea of movement and abstract idea of locus to describe and to indulge in all kind of motions. So solves problem of the Zeno string, and so we can give account of that. We have internal bodies and bodies in the circle, and then we have motions. And with these motions, we can understand dance better. And because spatially distributed motion is a transmission. We move across space. So moving across space can happen in music differently. But in the interiors of music, you can have spatial distinctions. But in dance, the space is introduced at a very grammatical level of two different legs, two different hands, two eyes, body. It's entirely in space. So then motions, various cycles of body motions, they coalesce together to create possibility for dance. Movements can only be on the Sukshma, but they can only act on Sukshma. Sukshma are the control regions of the Sukshma. They are the information content of the Sukshma. That is moving, but as soon as the artwork starts, the Sthul disappears and Sukshma is what is seen. Darshan. No, from Darshan. When I am seeing a dance, the body disappears and you not only, the body becomes transparent, you can see through the character inside. Like statue of Gandhi. The body is transparent, you can see Gandhi inside that. So condition where body becomes transparent is only in the radiant condition, where the body will be transparent. It's exposition. So music is impression in time. And impressions keep strengthening, you get a musical experience. And dance is expression. It's only outside, like a sculpture. And drama is impression, expression, breath. Where you have impressions going, expressions going, it's a breath like that.
Earlier you said art is sort of first disembodiment and then re-embodiment of some.
These two positions are there in art.
So how is it different from technology? When you come up with a technology, there also you...
technology is subclass of art.
not different from art?
Subclass.
What is it?
Art is an extensive term. I didn't include art. There is art of deception. It's also motor activity. People do it. Rhetorical arts. Arts of
Really, later on we have distinguished between fine art and other arts. But other arts are acts. Fine arts is the art.
the term technique. If you read any of the Platonic texts, is about art. Term technique is used for skill by Plato in all his dialogues. In fact, there is a sort of a tragic history of term technique, and which is you can see in the Punjabi Takhan. Takhans are there in Punjab. Jani Jain Singh was Takhan. Tarkhan in Hindi, Tarkhan, do the good work. Skill is part of art. If you look at the entire process of art, there is from conquest over memory and then putting into action. While putting into action, skill is more. That is a portion of art. Skill is art. And skillful is being so anyway, there are, details can be very many in terms of the quantities, etc. portion, and in terms of mediating or reflecting on the blending situations among art forms, and in terms of even appreciating art, and I think most important for future, in terms of the relation between color and sound, that speck of sound and speck of color, how are they related? That is, this Darshana is an issue to be theoretically opened now, very fundamentally it has to be opened, and its relation with Itihas has to be seen. How is color and sound are related to jazz. I think the work of arts, all of them are Ithihasic. All of them, fundamentally. If I see something anywhere, even Byzantine painting or something, it is Ithihasic. So any future art is going to be Ithihasic. That will be the content, the best of content.
line, all the strokes, that happens due to the color. The existence of the color.
In the
In the
material
stroke
space.
itself. Yeah.
Material space.
So there need not be any actual color. There need not be any actual color, but color is there in the imagination. And there in the each strokes or imagination.
Call you after 15 minutes.
That will
Okay.
the understanding was very there. When I'm looking at something, if I understand the stroke itself.
So anyway, most subtle question, I think is right. Most subtle question, which is in the beginning also, and yes, can you call Vagish Shukla? You call again. So, the most toughest question is the relation between sound and vision. It's a very little understood subject, but it's been sort of not in tradition. There is lots of understanding about it. We have to reclaim those understandings and to think anew this tradition. And only one thing I can say is that for sounds, they coalesce and there is, one can conceive Vagdevi. But for image, spread in space, there is no conception of a image Devta. There is none. There is a Vastu Purush is there. And there is a conception of Vastu Brahma. And but that is again transcendental concept. Not really like for coalescing of sound. One has a almost continuously, one can coalesce. Just forget punctuations. You forget punctuation, it collapse. You keep forgetting punctuation in space, it will not collapse. There is a fundamental asymmetry between sound and image, and this has to be redone. Largely because the image space has become very large, and the memories have become visual, are becoming visual now. Children memories, and very little sonic memories are there. Because of less sonic space, there is more kuntha also in society. And a misunderstanding of people and such things.
Sonic space is given as being sonic space is space. So space when we sounds are when we size.
So, but whatever it is, there is a very deep issue here, and we have to bring this issue in all its details, variety of details, in film, in drama, in everywhere, and one has to bring this up, including new forms of art, involving them, both of them, and involving new technology.